Welcome to the 3D Disciples podcast, where we're working together to develop disciples who display God's love as we deploy into God's world. I'm your host, Hannah, and with me today, as always, is the pastor of FBC Clarion, Jason Hunter. Let's hit the trail running. In 1863, President Abraham Lincoln called for an additional 300,000 men to help win the Civil War. That was 2 years after the war began. At that time in U.S. history, if you were an able-bodied man, you either had to join the military when called or choose one of two other options: pay a commutation fee for $300 or pay a substitute to take your place. While Lincoln was obviously already serving as commander-in-chief of the Union Army, he wanted to set a good example for the service, so he determined to hire a substitute to serve in his place. Thus, in the fall of 1864, one of Lincoln's representatives approached a young man by the name of John Summerfield Staples. When asked if he would volunteer to be a substitute for Lincoln, Staples replied, "If my father consents." For 11 months, Staples stood in the place of Abraham Lincoln, willing to die in his place, should the need or duty present itself. In a much more profound way, when Jesus laid down his life and died on the cross, the perfect God-man, through his passive obedience, actually and literally took the place of sinners and substituted his death for theirs. He was willing to step in and die instead of us. Galatians 3:13 tells us that in order to save us from our sins, Jesus redeemed us from the curse of the law because he took upon himself the curse of our wrongdoing. That quote comes from Chasing Infinity, and we have Easter coming up. So that's kind of why I chose that to start with. Is this substitute that's coming up. Chasing Infinity, just to add to the listeners, is an episode that we're going to be recording. It's a book out there that we're going to call it a discipleship book, or focus on, by Mark. And the link to that is going to be somewhere available. But back to the Easter, this substitute that's in our place. Jason, what's Easter all about?
Well, probably my habit of talking about Easter is this is the most important day in human history. Mm-hmm. The one day that matters the most. So Easter is obviously the day we celebrate, we remember, we commemorate, we recognize the resurrection of Jesus. Mm-hmm. I've said so many different things about it over the years that have stuck with me. Mm-hmm. I think about Easter, so I talk about Good Friday, the day Jesus died, as the day that he paid our debt, and that Easter is the day we get our receipt. Mm-hmm. And that I think what we see in that God is saying that the payment was satisfactory, and that the resurrection proves that Jesus had paid the debt, that he had conquered death, and that sin, the power of sin, which is death, is broken. Mm-hmm. And so it is the day that we hope for. It is the day that all hope rests in. I look at the Bible starting in Genesis. I drew this try to see if I can describe what I drew, like kind of two triangles coming in. So like from the Genesis side coming to the cross, coming to Easter, the big end of the triangles at the Genesis, and as it gets to the cross, it gets narrower and narrower and narrower. Mm-hmm. And then as on the other side of the cross, the triangle, as it moves away from the cross towards Revelation, it gets wider and wider and wider. Mm-hmm. And that's a drawing I show to show that at the beginning, the clarity and our understanding of what God's doing in Genesis, we start to get there. But as it moves towards the cross, it gets clearer and clearer and clearer and clearer. Mm-hmm. And then as we move away from the cross into the eschaton, to the end of the world, we start to okay, the Bible gives us some pictures and we have some ideas what that's like, but it gets less clear the further away from the cross. But where God's plan is the clearest, where it's like a pinpoint, laser point mm-hmm. clarity.
We know what's going on.
Is in those 3 days, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, Easter.
Yeah, it's like the Bible really slows down.
Yeah.
At that moment. I actually remember you bringing it up during the pastor's class, which is when I started to get to know you really well. I asked you a question that was in those wider triangles, and you were like, what's most clear is that, and that's cool that we have a holiday devoted to just that.
Yeah.
Back to the holiday, though, So I feel weird saying Happy Easter. I don't even know what Easter means.
Yeah.
Do you know? Or like, is there a better way of like telling the world what really is going on?
Yeah, well, one of the traditions we still do here sometimes. I usually do this. There's a Christian greeting for Easter, where someone comes up to someone and it's like, and instead of Happy Easter, it's like He is risen, and the proper response is He is risen indeed. And
I didn't know that. Yeah.
So like if you were to come up, He's risen, and your response would be He's risen indeed. And so there's still some people here who know that, and so
ooh, I'm a part of the club now.
So I'll say that to them, and they'll go, and they'll respond as they're like He's risen indeed, and so I think that's probably better. You could say Happy Resurrection Day. That sounds strange too.
Yeah.
I think referring to it maybe even as Resurrection Day I think Christians changing the vernacular a little bit because the world has kind of hijacked Easter.
As many holidays.
As a lot of other things.
Yeah.
And so it means, for most people it means a bunny rabbit that lays eggs, very pretty and colored eggs.
Yep.
And
for the longest time for me. Sure.
And kids, it's another chance to give kids gifts. And so I think referred to it as Resurrection Day or, Blessed Resurrection Day.
Yeah. We're still working on that.
Let's start a new fad.
Yeah. It's probably hard to give it a quick phrase because, it does mean, like you said, it's the most impactful day in human history. Like, how do you say that in 2 words?
Yeah.
So Easter is coming up. Perhaps this episode is during a time when it's not Easter for you, but we can always celebrate the resurrection for sure in daily life. But just to get people in tune with what's going on at the church this week, there's things going on Thursday and Friday. I don't know about Saturday.
Nope.
No, nothing. Okay. And then, of course, Sunday service. What's going on Thursday? We have this thing called Tenebrae. Which I had never heard of until coming to FBC. Can you explain Tenebrae?
And I never heard of it till I came to FBC either.
Okay.
So it's not in my growing up traditions, we didn't call it that. I'd heard a lot of churches would have what they call a Maundy Thursday service, and I'm not even sure what those words mean. The Maundy part, I'd have to look that back up again. But because we do Tenebrae here, that's what we call our Thursday night service.
Okay.
A lot of churches will have something on Thursday night because Thursday night is the night that the Lord would have had the Last Supper with His disciples. He would have gone to the Garden of Gethsemane and gotten betrayed. So it's really a commemoration of the Last Supper is what happens on Thursday night. So the word Tenebrae means night of darkness is what it means. And so we do all kind of different things on that night. A traditional Tenebrae service would be where you'd have a large candelabra and you would read different passages of Scripture that would coincide with like Christ crucifixion, and as you read one, you'd put out a light, so that it slowly gets darker and darker and darker until finally all the lights are put out. So it's kind of a somber kind of reflection on what's getting ready to happen in in the Passion Week, particularly Good Friday coming up the next day, and the trial and the beating and the flogging and the crown of thorns and the eventual crucifixion. What we will do, we'll have a supper, and so we'll have a meal together, kind of, again, based on the idea that they had that last meal. And then we'll come up into the sanctuary and we'll have a service. There'll be some singing, but it'll be, again, focused on that kind of somber. Let's take a moment to at least think about what Christ did for us, that substitution, that, what did He go through?
Yeah.
Even just focusing on the physical part of that.
Yeah.
And so that we just kind of at least have to face the reality of what it cost Him.
What it went. Yeah. That's a good way of looking
So that's
at it.
Tenebrae.
Can we add real quick to that? Dinner's at 6. But to sign up for that, you go to fbcclarion.com, hit the plus sign, and then put how many guests you're going to have to Tenebrae dinner.
Yeah.
And then if you can't make it to dinner, feel free to obviously join the service as well. So in real time, those listening, That's what's going on Thursday.
Yeah, the dinner, it was about an hour after the dinner starts, we'll have our service.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then Friday, I think our community is doing something.
Yep. So last year, a group of pastors I get with every week, we call ourselves kind of jokingly the League of Pastors. And we've been praying together for a couple of years now. And so one of the visions that we have as a group is to show our community that though we belong to different churches, different denominations, we have some different theological backgrounds and understandings and different practices, there is one thing that connects us, and that is the blood of Christ. And so we want to show our community that, yeah, we might worship in different buildings on Sunday, but we are one. And so last year we started a community communion service. It's at Hart Chapel.
Which is on Clarion University.
Yeah, it's
or
on the
Penn
university.
West Clarion campus. Yeah.
Yep, and it's at 7:00.
Yeah, that is at 7. I do know that.
And so, yeah, so we just get together. Each pastor, we split it up. We all get a little piece of the pie to say something, share something. We do some worship together, and we just take communion together. I often refer to communion as our common communion.
Yep.
And it's just a good time to really show our community where we live, the common.
Yeah, there is unity between Jesus believers.
Yeah, and the people who went to it last year, the response was, I mean, I had people who say, like, this is one of the best things we've done as a community ever. And, and so it was really impactful.
Yeah. So you don't have to sign up for that.
Nope.
But that is the Friday right before.
Yeah, Good Friday.
Good Friday. Okay. And then Sunday, of course, we just have our worship service at 10:30.
Yep.
Between the Dunkin' and McDonald's.
Between the Dunkin'
and
As
the
McDonald's.
end says, don't close off the ending when Jason tells you what's going on at the end of his podcast. So that's Easter, and we're looking forward to it. Hope to see you all there.
That brings us to the end of another episode of the 3D Disciple Podcast. Well done. You've taken another step into becoming an intentional disciple of Jesus, and that is no small feat. Don't forget, we really do want your questions. You can text us at 814-334-8426. We ask you to consider following the podcast. That way you can be notified every time a new episode drops. We invite you also to come and worship with us at 10:30 a.m. on Sundays. You can join us at our Main Street campus, which is in downtown Clarion, located between the Dunkin' Donuts and McDonald's. Or you can find our online campus on all the platforms like YouTube or Facebook by just typing in FBC Clarion. You can find everything else you need at fbcclarion.com. All the links are found in the description below. I want to take just a moment to thank Hannah, our host today, as well as Brianna, our director-producer behind the scenes. We'll see you next time as we take another step into following Jesus.